Great Scott, Helen! Spoilers ahead for Back to the Future! Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Screenwriters Rewatch, a series where we venture into IMDb's top 250 film list, pull out some classics, and have a look at them to see whether or not they deserve their place in film history, but far more importantly, whether they deserve their place in the script department vaults located under the broken clock tower of Hill Valley. That was wordy, wasn't it? But before we get going, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, check out all of our previous stuff on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Audible, things like that. You can find us all on there. You can also find us on TikTok. We do things over there now. That's exciting. And Instagram and whatnot. You can also buy us a coffee, can't they, Helen? Because we like coffee here at
We love coffee.
Coffee. It's a really good thing. It's a problem for us. Buy us more. So you can check that out as well. Keep your ears open at the end of this as well. We will reveal what we will be reading, what we'll be watching next time. So get involved with us there. I'm getting too into the book club vibe of this, Helen, I think. So there we go. But today I'm joined by Helen. Hi, Helen. Nice to see you. Very exciting. As we're gonna try avoiding kissing our mothers and punching our fathers, and screenwriters travel back in time and rewatch Back to the Future Part 1. How exciting is that? We like this film. I know that already. We've discussed the fact that both of us enjoy this. But what are you bringing to this rewatch, Helen? What's your history? No pun intended there. What's your history with Back to the Future?
I think apart from my childhood crush on Michael J. Fox, I've watched this film a lot of times. I grew up on it, watching it again and again, all three of them, absolutely fantastic classics. And I've shared them with my children. It's timeless, ironically, timeless. Very good. And a little fun fact, no coincidence at all, and my husband hopefully will be listening to this. His birthday is the 21st of October. Maybe there's a coincidence there.
Perhaps. How exciting. Oh, okay. This is a again a classic for me. I am exactly the same as you. You have those movies that you watch when you're ill and you're off school, and or work, as we are now, sadly. This is one of mine. This is a oh, I don't feel very well. I put on all of Back to the Future, but it was embarrassingly late in life, and I have to admit it was embarrassingly late in life that I realized that there was a part 2 and 3. I believed I know well,
I'm not sure you're qualified to do this today, Marcus, actually.
Well, I know now. It's fine. I've watched them now. But no, it's one of those things I just didn't realize. This was this perfect film, and despite the fact it says to be continued at the end of it, I just never twigged it. And then I got to discover Back to the Future's Part 2 and 3. How exciting is that? But no, this is one of those films that it's like a seminal moment for me in like cinematic education. I think I love it very deeply because of the time travel elements. Regular listeners and watchers will know that I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. This is one of those things. This is time travel done in a very different way, on a big budget, on a big screen, and it's cool. It's very cool. But I'll try and stop gushing over it a little bit. What did you find anything? Did you find anything different this time around when you were looking at it? What jumped out at you?
I think just the opening scene was actually very cleverly set up. It took its time to build up and focused a lot on the clocks. And was it something silly like 2.5 minutes or 90 seconds, something like that? That it just pans across all these clocks, and it really sets you up. This film is about time, and we're not in a hurry to tell you it. And I thought, actually, as a writer, it's such a subtle thing, but it means a lot. It just sets you up already. You know what this is going to be about. I thought that was, it was lost on me before, I think, before I knew anything about screenwriting. But yeah, it meant something. What about you?
Sure. I mean, a similar kind of thing. The opening sequence is what a bang! What a thing to start on. You begin with the as you say, the panning across, and then Marty McFly I love the fact that you don't see his face until he has been blown backwards by the amps and things like that. You know, you finally get to see him, and he's kind of, oh man, you know, that's, oh, this is terrible. You know, I think that's really smart. It's a nice moment there because it keeps you in suspense. You don't know who this guy is. You don't know what's going on. All of this is peculiar, and it begins quite right as you say. You know, this is about time, but it also begins in an offbeat fashion. And I think that, and it's an offbeat fashion that continues. You know,
Mm.
the two protagonists of this, Doc and Marty, are off are offbeat. They are very different, a very different kind of protagonist. You know, perhaps Marty McFly not so much, but he's you know, he's probably the cool guy for that kind of time. But certainly Doc Brown is something quite different, protagonist wise. But and yet at the same time, he is everything you expect from a scientist
Mm.
in that sense. You know, the white massive wild hair and the you know, singed lab coat and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a treat. And just to pick up on your analysis of time there, I think it's so interesting that, you know, the clocks are, so it's kind of, I suppose, Chekhov's clock in a sense, isn't it? Because
Mm.
it's you begin with those clocks, and then later on we have the clock tower, you know, under which of course the script department vaults are buried. It's important to mention. And you know, but it's all of these clocks that we pan past are moving, and then we get to the really important one, and it's stopped,
Mm.
and it's not going anywhere, and it is that discussion of, you know, time is different here. This is a different thing, and we're going to do this in a different way. And
Mm.
I think it's, yeah. So just to kind of mirror your analysis, it's exactly that. What do you find? What brings you Back to the Future? What is it about it that makes you return again and again and again?
I think time travel is a storyline that I immediately am drawn to.
Hmm.
I find it fascinating that the the idea that you could go back and one tiny change could make such a significant ripple, that butterfly effect
Mm,
throughout. And it's something that we see again and again, most recently in Tenet, which was very cleverly complicated but brilliant, and little things in like in Interstellar when they go down to this planet and actually
yeah.
5 minutes is like, 40 years or something silly, and just the physics behind that really intrigues me.
Mm,
But fundamentally the world that's created in these, in not just in this film but in all three films so brilliantly, the continuity of the settings, particularly the central place where you've got that tower clock, the clock tower, and the school as well plays quite a significant role.
mm,
And it's the world, it's the way they depict themselves. It's kind of like in the, I suppose back then it was that near future sort of dystopia it ended up being, didn't it? But it
mm,
played on lots of different ways that this one setting could become or has been, and how it could be changed. So that's what keeps me going back, just to indulge in that. And I've
yeah.
tried to kind of pick holes in that, in the continuity of it, and I struggle. I do struggle with
Yeah.
it because I think it's just so cleverly done.
It's a very it's almost overwritten in some senses, isn't it? The fact that
Mm.
it's so intricate. And you know, you can then go into the second movie, which I won't go too much into, but you know, the second movie, they go back and they revisit that same thing again,
Yeah.
and there are things from the first film that now make sense because of things in the second film, and they, you know, they slot these two things together in such a brilliantly intricate way, and it's really it's really something to behold. I think from I mean, it is for me, it is the time travel movie. You know,
Mm.
you want to look at, and it's referenced, you know, in terms of pop culture. It's I think it's referenced. Yeah, it is. It's referenced directly in the Avengers Endgame. It's a you know, they're talking about time travel in that, and they go, oh, you know, like Back to the Future, and they're like, that's not how it works, man. You know, there's a whole exchange there. You know, and I think that's, you know, I'm not saying that you have to be in a Marvel movie to know that you've made it as a film, but um, I think it does illustrate the level of kind of pop culture penetration that this thing has. And from a writing point of view, the thing for me I find fascinating, and I am sorry, Helen, but I feel as though I'm going to be kind of echoing you a little bit again. I think this is going to be one of those sessions. But the thing for me that in terms of structure that keeps me coming back to it is how interesting this is, because you start off on first kind of observation. This is three acts. We are beginning at home in Marty's own time. Things are a certain way. Then the inciting incident happens. The Libyans, and he's thrown backwards in time, and we have our adventure. He needs to try and prevent things and learn and grow, and he's changing and they're changing, and it's all lovely, and in that sense. And then we return home again, changed at the end. Happy days. This is conventional in a sense. However, it's also not at all, because
Mm.
of the nature of time travel, and because of the nature of what we're experiencing here as a cinema experience and as a movie experience. These are it's totally off the wall. You have I think what I'm trying to say is that this film shouldn't work, because
Yeah.
it's one of those things that the plot just is so complex, and it shouldn't make any sense. But where it's written so well and structured so neatly,
Mm.
everything falls really, really well into place. And so you can understand it from a kind of a quite implicit point of view. Um,
I
yeah.
actually think this is definitely made up of 5 acts, this particular,
Ooh.
film, and there's some really key turning points, and they link really well. When you think about, that sort of you're constantly told, aren't you, you need to raise the stakes at these turning points, the stakes have to be raised each time, and when you think about the stakes that are there for Marty particularly, the first one is he goes back to the future,
Mhm.
and in doing so he also tries to save somebody from getting run over that turns out to be his dad, and in doing so ends up being the one that his mum has a crush on. So
Mhm.
that's quite a fundamental, no, I don't want my mum to fancy me
Yeah.
kind of thing. And then he's got to find the doc and convince him who he is and what's happened, and and they've got to come up with a solution. So can he get back? And then not only is that going on, but you've got the fact that his mum is still pining after him, and then you've got Biff and the principal just keep lumbering along and making things hard for him.
Mm.
And then he's got the threat that if he makes too many changes, his family are disappearing because his parents are separating too far and apart. And then right at the end, he's thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go back to the future, and Doc's going to be dead. So can I save him too?" And of course, he rejects that idea. But we know, spoiler, it turns out that he doesn't. So when you think about it in that rhythmical way, I think there's actually 5 acts to this.
Mm. That's really interesting. I totally see that. Like, I totally see that. I think that the way this yeah, the way this moves, you almost have to have that, don't you? Because you've got so many moving parts. If you separate it in that way, it becomes more palatable. Maybe that's exactly why this works. Maybe that's
Mm.
exactly why this works. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because this shouldn't be as straightforward as it is, and yet it is totally accessible. But I think there's an element there of in the characterization. I mean, you've got a teenage boy who is fancied by his mother. There is nothing, as a former teenage boy, there is nothing more that you could think that could be worse than that in a situation such as this. And then you add into the mix, impending doom if you don't get your mum and dad back together, and then you have to start thinking about the fact that your mum and dad have to be your mum and dad at some point. That there's a lot of really clever teenage angst stuff that they've interwoven to this to make it accessible, as well as that structure. Is there anything else that kind of jumps out to you as why this works so well? Do you think?
I think it feels quite genuine. So, where Biff, for example, is trying to, get with Lorraine, his mum, in steps Calvin Klein as this, actually, no, I don't want you touching my mum.
Mm,
But to Lorraine and everybody else, it looks like he's being chivalrous and he fancies her. So that feeds that desire to, want for Lorraine to want to be with Calvin.
yeah.
And that feels like a really genuine reason why she just doesn't go, oh, he's so amazing and wonderful. He keeps feeding that. But he can't not feed it. He has to intervene, doesn't he? So
Yeah.
it kind of, if you were that character, what would you do? And I feel like I would do the same that he's doing, even though it's counterproductive to what he actually wants to do. So I think it's that genuineness that makes it work as well, even
Mm.
though it's completely sci-fi.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think it's grounded, isn't it? It feels
Mm.
it's grounded in real emotion, and that don't know if you call it a MacGuffin. Actually, the prop of the photographed with the fading brother and sister,
Mm.
and then Marty himself. It's probably not a MacGuffin actually at all, is it? But that prop is such a great visual demonstration
Yeah,
of this is what's going to happen to you. It's a really
yeah.
it's a really clever way of doing it, and it's a great way. you know you want to lesson from a movie. Screenwriters, show don't tell. That's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
That is a great way of demonstrating. We are showing you what's going to happen in a purely visual way. Yes, we're told at other points and things like that, but you could, if you wanted to, do away with most of the dialogue surrounding that and have Marty looking at this photograph and kind of going, "Oh, oh, I get it," and we get it too, because it's visceral, and it's pretty harrowing stuff to see these people disappear before your eyes, and then so that's there you go. Maybe that's a good example of that we found there. Is there anything? Is there anything? And it's almost sacrilegious, and I don't really want to ask this question, Helen, but and I'm not sure I have an answer to this. But is there anything for you that doesn't work? Sorry.
Mm. I think it would be very easy to sort of say the representation of women, the female characters are very one dimensional, but the story isn't necessarily, it's not about them. It's a period piece. I don't want to say that 1985 is now of a period time, but it is really
It is, yeah,
it's
sure,
37 years ago. So
yeah,
the audience were very different, the writing was very different, and I think it's almost a bit thankful that there aren't many opportunities for women to be portrayed in one way or the other. But also, I think the other thing that's really good is the relationship. Apart from Marty having a relationship with his girlfriend Jennifer, that's a very bare. You hardly see any of that.
mm,
But anything that's even remotely sexualized involves his mum, so it's completely not sexual at all.
absolutely, yeah,
You don't see it in that way. You don't see her in the same way that you would have done maybe if he wasn't
mm,
her son. So I think
yeah,
that's quite clever in that way. That's maybe why it is still quite a watchable film, because
mm,
it's not dated in the way that other films from that time period are, in that
yeah.
sense. But
She also has a lot of agency, actually, thinking about it, in terms of her pursuit of who she believes to be Calvin Klein. This isn't a you think about the setting, think about the time it's set in, as well as the time it was
mm,
made. The idea of kind of young girls being chased, and not going after guys, and not kind of having that sort of that kind of sexual desire, as it were. Um, was very much more a thing. Um, so I suppose in a sense, and you're quite right. There is, it's not sexualized because it's like, oh God, stop, please, Lorraine, no, please stop it,
yeah.
Lorraine. But she, in a different context, from her point of view, she's just going to get hers, and
Mm.
there is something quite kind of agency giving about the fact that
Yeah, yeah.
she's just going to get hers, and I kind of I think that's quite interesting. I'd not looked at it from that angle, but
Mm.
it's an interesting element there, I think.
Yeah. I don't, apart from perhaps the Doc being he's a brilliant character, and maybe he seems like a stereotypical scientist because he's been around for so long and he's the
Mm,
benchmark, perhaps.
yeah.
Um, it's hard to kind of say, but he do you know, if you think of a slightly eclectic scientist, you're immediately going to think of him, and is that because he's a replica of something else, or is he the that golden idol? I'm not sure.
Mm,
But I don't think you could write him any other way. I don't have very much to say that's negative about the film, and maybe
no.
that's partly an emotional thing. I think it's too close to my
Yeah,
heart.
I think that's all right though, because I'm in a similar boat with the in the sense with this one. I think that you could go down the route of saying there are some performances that don't particularly stand up. The writing of George McFly is a little on the nose in places. The idea that you could you get the girl and then you suddenly become manically successful is problematic. There are things that don't quite hold up. But as you say, I think that I think a lot of it just doesn't really matter because ultimately the story it's said, the thread of itself, the thread of the story, the structure of the story, 5 acts or otherwise, there's so much going on here that works so brilliantly. I think you can overlook some of the sort of slightly more obvious and less kind of nuanced elements of this movie for the sake of the ride, and I think that really is a what more do you want from a DeLorean peddling time travel movie than fun, and this has it in droves. I think we can both agree on that.
Absolutely.
So we come to the final question, the question that we both know the answer to already, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Does this, Helen, belong in the script department vaults hiding away underneath the clock tower in Hill Valley?
Absolutely. Yes.
Categorical yes.
Categorical.
Categorical yes from me
Yes.
as well. This is, like we said earlier, this is the time travel movie. It's seminal, it's influential. The idea, you just looking at this from a science fiction perspective on how time travel works in movies, it's there. This is where it comes from. It's visual effects, everything. Because I think this is an ILM job, and it looks brilliant. It feels brilliant, and it stands up. Put it in there. We'll get a DeLorean in the vaults. We'll put the Blu-ray in the driver's seat, and it's gonna be it's gonna be
The
great.
VHS.
The
Yeah.
VHS, yeah. I think I ran my VHS out of this one actually. Yeah, it's one of those. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me, Helen. This has been it's been a good chat. Next week we are chatting. Drum roll, please. Another science. It's not science fiction actually. It's fantasy. It's fantasy. It's
It's
important.
fantasy.
It's fantasy.
Fantasy.
We are going for the original Star Wars. People, I know it's happening. Red alert. So join us back then for that conversation. That's bound to be an interesting one. But until next time, remember you can check out other episodes of the Script Department knocking you out all over the place. So go find them. And until next time, we will see you soon. Bye bye.